Oh Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou?
Lumberfoots.
When I started playing Waystalker, I honestly wasn't blown away. I was so used to one-shotting everything with a huntsman and bounty hunter that the Waystalker just felt underwhelming by comparison. However, after investing some serious hours into the class, I fell in love with it. This is the most balanced class I've heavily played up until now. The balance between melee and ranged, excellent melee horde clearing with very good ranged, but you have to work hard for the ranged. You're generally obligated to get headshots if you want to one-shot most heavy mobs. This is mainly due to there not being breakpoints, so to speak. The closest thing would be two-shotting mobs as opposed to one-shotting them. This is a good thing in my opinion. On the bounty hunter and huntsman you can reach breakpoints so that you may one-shot practically everything the game throws at you, pretty much forcing you to go fully ranged all the time. That's not necessarily a bad thing, in my opinion. I enjoy feeling like a Terminator, annihilating everything in my path as though they were beings made of paper. At the end of the day, if you're given an FN scar and a butter knife to defend yourself, your instinct is to rely on the more powerful of the two options. This is an exaggeration of course, but you get the idea. So not having these breakpoints make you depend on more range shots in order to take down heavier mobs. Less ammo, more shots required. You're probably thinking, so what's the point? And therefore, what makes the Waystalker or Kerillian in general so special in this case? Well, I'm happy you asked. Kerillian has the best melee weapons in the game. Weapons that can take down the heavier mobs more effectively than her ranged weapon options. This makes the Waystalker one of the, if not the most balanced class in the game, in terms of melee to range ratio. On the Huntsman and Bounty Hunter, 90% of my kills were achieved with my ranged weapon. The same applies to Pyromancer, without the breakpoints. Whereas on the Waystalker it was closer to 50-50. I depend on my ranged weapon to take out specials and some elites, and I depend on my melee weapon to clear hordes and very heavy mobs. In a way, Waystalker forces you to be somewhat more tactical. With the longbow, for example, you don't have as much ammo, and at the same time you generally want to be aiming for headshots, especially those mobs that take 2 or more shots to kill. Instead of just spamming your ranged weapon, you want to take your time aiming, even if it's only half a second or less, still much longer than spamming. You want to memorize which mobs you can kill more effectively with your ranged weapon, and which ones are easier to kill with your melee weapon. After some practice, you will automatically change between your weapons in a very efficient manner, depending on the situation. With the swift bow, you can spam it to your heart's content. You pretty much have unlimited ammo. The downside, however, is that practically every single heavy mob, even those that are armored, has to be meleeed down, since the swift bow is generally quite weak. If you're one of those players that's not very fond of ranged and prefer to go into melee, that's fine. You can roll the hunter trait on your swift bow, shoot heavy mobs in order to get the hunter buff, and then go in with your melee weapon for the kill. The Hagbane, on the other hand, is somewhat of a combination of the other 2 bows available to the Waystalker. You have less ammo than the longbow, it's very weak with its initial damage, but it has excellent damage over time. There are several ways of going about the Waystalker bow playstyles. This is not taking into consideration the melee weapon. Kerillian has some fantastic melee weapons with excellent horde clearing and armor penetration. The following playstyles are just a few. You've got the Swiftbow Light Attacks playstyle, which is excellent for ranged horde clearing when available, average specials killing, below average elite killing, and good boss DPS. Secondly, you've got the Longbow Heavy Attacks playstyle, which is decent for ranged horde clearing when available, very good specials killing, good elite killing, and good boss DPS. And then third, you've got the Hagbane Hybrid Attacks playstyle, so to speak, which provides average horde clearing when available, good specials killing, good elite killing, and excellent boss DPS. By far, the best boss DPS Kerillian has available. All 3 bows have their strengths and their weaknesses. The key is finding that balance. Okay, so for talents, starting at tier 1, I would personally go for increases critical hit chance by 5%, as opposed to attack speed or stamina regeneration. Stamina regeneration is not that crucial for this class, to be honest. Not very necessary. Attack speed can be helpful, I guess, but you know, when you've got 5% crit to choose from, you're generally going to go with 5% crit. And that actually goes quite well with the second tier, which is Daughter of the Hunt. While above 45% health, Kerillian's critical hits gain 30% additional power boost. This is very nice since the majority of the time you are going to be above 45% health. You don't have to worry too much. And don't forget that you do have your passive, which is Carillion, regenerates health over time when below half health. This basically heals you up slowly up to 50% of your health. So that's above 45%. And if you're careful and you're playing correctly, you shouldn't be taking huge amounts of damage anyway. So, you know, gaining 30% additional power boost from your crits, that's magnificent. Arcane Bodkins increases damage bonus of headshots. If you're using the swift bow, there might be an argument for using this, but with the longbow, for example, you're going to be one-shotting pretty much everything on the head anyway. The only thing you can't really one-shot are Maulders because they've got super armor on their head. And of course Chaos Warriors, which are super armor as well. You're not going to be killing them with your longbow or with your shotbow or with anything aside from your melee weapons. Iron Feather Flights returns 30% ammunition on boss death. Very circumstantial, really not worth it. You're generally not going to have ammo issues, so I wouldn't really bother going for this. This is definitely the number one choice. This would be the second choice. Again, I really wouldn't go for that regardless. I would always go for this. Okay, so for third tier, Vol's Quiver. Regeneration also recovers arrows or bolts. Okay, so when I started playing this game, my friends and I, you know, we were newer to the game. We were taking more damage. It was riskier for us. So we would take more damage. So generally we would go for Rejuvenating Locust, which is regeneration is applied on all party members, but the effect is halved. So yeah, you're helping your teammates regenerate health, but in practice it's good, but it's just not amazing. It's not great. It's good, but it's just not good enough. I mean, yeah, if you're just starting off on Legend and all of your team members are taking so much damage all the time, it's a good option, I guess. It's good. You can go for this. Isha's Embrace, increased Carillion health regeneration. You're already regenerating health. It's not super fast or anything. With this, it just makes it faster. Again, you're never going to be receiving that much damage, and there's generally enough health available to heal yourself. So even though it's good, I really wouldn't go with this in practice. Since I focus a lot on killing specials that spawn from a distance or even at relatively close range, and quite a few elites here and there, well, quite a lot of elites actually, then you want to be ready. You want to have your quiver as full as possible with arrows so you can just take them out and start killing whatever you need to kill. So if you can regenerate ammo, that's always a good thing by definition. Fourth tier, kills grant temporary health. Probably pretty much the only choice. You're going to be one-shotting most mobs regardless. Even elites, if you hit them on the head, most elites, you're going to be killing them with one shot. So you want to be gaining that temporary health from your kills, not from your crits. This is not like the Pyromancer where you're critting a lot, not killing everything in one shot, but you are critting a lot. So with the Pyromancer, for example, it's worth going with this talent. But for the Waystalker, it's just really not worth it. Definitely Kane's Thirst. Champion of Lauren, again, like every other guide I've done, this is completely useless. Never go for this, ever, ever, ever. Ever, please, never go for this, ever. I just don't know how many times I have to say this. And for the last tier, Azrai Focus. Reduces the cooldown of True Shot Volley by 30%. This is quite good, I have to say. You're going to be using your True Shot Volley quite a lot, especially in those tricky situations where you get maybe a special or two and you just can't take out your longbow or your shortbow or Hagsbane or whatever. You just don't have time. Maybe you're overwhelmed with mobs around you. You can just True Shot Volley and you have a good chance of taking them out. Life Bloom Arrows, using True Shot Volley recovers 20 temporary health. Pretty useless. I just can't think of any situation where this would be useful. Courteous Blessing, using True Shot Volley recovers 20% of Carillion's maximum ammunition. Not really worth it. With a longbow, if you have the Scrounger trait on your longbow, plus Vol's Quiver, it's going to be generally difficult to run out of ammo. It's possible, but generally difficult. With your swift bow, you already have 75 arrows off the bat. That's an insane amount of arrows. If you have Vol's Quiver with your swift bow, then it's virtually impossible to run out of arrows. Not to mention if you have Scrounger as well on your swift bow, then you're just asking for it really. You're never literally ever going to run out of ammo. So it would be impossible. Using True Shot Volley, I mean, yes, possibly if you're using Hagbane. Remember, Hagsbane only has 25 arrows. It's very little. And with Vol's Quiver and Hagsbane, you're recovering ammo, but it's very slowly because the less ammo you have, the slower the regeneration is. So 20%, I mean, you're recovering like what, 5 arrows with every True Shot Volley? I just don't think it's worth it, to be honest. My preference at least would be Azrai Focus. So I thought I'd do something different this time around. I'll be ranking the melee weapons from worst to best. I tested them out on Chaos Warriors mainly because Chaos Warriors are the toughest enemies to take down. So if you can do decent or good damage against them, then you should be able to do good damage versus every other mob in the game. Of course, this list is my personal opinion, my personal preference. I'm sure not everybody will agree with this list. However, this is the conclusion I have reached after testing each melee weapon individually and after many hours of playing. You will see that I have included how many heavy attacks are required to kill a Chaos Warrior by hitting them on the head and the body, and how many light attacks are required to kill a Chaos Warrior by hitting them on the head and the body separately. Of course, I included light attacks to the head and body just for the lulz, really, because realistically you're not going to be using your light attacks on a Chaos Warrior ever with your melee weapon. Some weapons, there's like 1 or 2 weapons that can actually be effective by using light attacks on a Chaos Warrior. So as you have seen, my number 1 pick is the glaive, all round. Yes, the dual daggers technically do more damage versus bosses and just in general, but the glaive is just so versatile. It's just amazing for horde clearing, it's amazing for elites, chaos warriors, but it's just amazing for everything pretty much. Except for bosses, it's not that amazing, but that's fine because you've got your bows to take care of bosses, and your teammates will also help. Obviously you're not in charge of killing bosses by yourself unless you've got the Hagbane with a certain setup, and then you can technically kill it by yourself very quickly. I'll show you that after. So here's my setup for my melee weapon. I've gone with the glaive, like I said. I've gone for 5% crit chance, which should be the base property you go for, and then the second property you can either go for power versus chaos. For example, I've gone for power versus chaos. It stacks with my charm with more chaos, so that's 20% for chaos warriors, and then with infantry for maulers I get 30% additional. But there's also a very good argument to go with attack speed, 5% attack speed. I would also highly recommend 5% attack speed. For the melee weapon trait, I've gone for resourceful combatant. Melee critical hits reduces the remaining cooldown of your career skill by 2%. During hordes, on many occasions you're just going to be smacking rats around a lot, and the glaive has excellent cleave, so you'll be hitting a lot of rats at the same time, which means you'll also be getting a lot of crits. So you will be getting your ultimate cooldown back quite quickly, so you can spam your ultimate quite a lot, all things considered. And remember that your true shot volley, which is your ultimate, is excellent to take care of specials, any tricky elites that might be causing issues. Overall, it's just magnificent. Ideally, your attack pattern for the glaive would be swinging, block, swing, block, swing, block. That's when there aren't too many rats in front of you. When they start accumulating, you want to swing, block, push. Swing, block, push. Swing, block, push. And then once you've pushed the rats back and you've got some space, then in that case you can swing, swing again, block, push. Swing, swing again, block, push. This will take a bit of practice and getting used to it. You will just have to time it yourself until you become comfortable with it. For heavy elites, of course, or for any type of elite really, you want to go for heavy attack generally. Block, heavy attack, block. Ideally, always aiming for the head. That's where you're going to do the most damage. Especially with the second heavy attack, which is first, second. There, you see? First, second. With that second heavy attack, you will get 5k hits or more. Just another example just for your reference, if you're using the one-handed sword, which is actually very good for killing elites, you generally want to stick to your first heavy attack. So heavy attack, block, heavy attack, block, heavy attack, block. Always generally like this. This is where you're going to be most effective with your damage. And of course, always aiming for the head. I already listed the strengths and weaknesses of each of the Waystalker's bows at the beginning of the video. I will go a bit more in depth now so that you may have a better understanding of what you can expect. My overall top pick is the longbow. I used to use the swift bow a lot at the beginning, but I became quite frustrated with not being able to kill armored elites and armored specials quickly enough. This is most likely because of having played with the bounty hunter and huntsman before the Waystalker, where I could pretty much one-shot everything in my path. Therefore, I feel quite compelled to do the same with the Waystalker, or at least coming close to doing the same. The zoom-in feature for the longbow can be somewhat jarring at first, like Sienna's beam staff, but you eventually get used to it. The longbow is more tactical and slow. You want to try and headshot most mobs in order to one-shot them. It's great for elites, great for specials, good for bosses, good for horde clearing from a distance, unlike the swift bow, which is a fantastic horde clearer even at melee. I would recommend the Scrounger trait, which goes beautifully with the Vol's Quiver talent that regenerates ammo. Both of these will help you be ready throughout the match for specials. As for properties, I've gone with Power vs Armored and Power vs Skaven, along with the Charm, which stacks with Power vs Chaos and Power vs Infantry. I like to go with Armored and Skaven because this gives me a semi-break point when it comes to killing storm vermin. I can either one-shot them on the head or I can two-shot them on the body. And with Power vs Chaos and Power vs Infantry on the Charm, I can also reach certain breakpoints for mobs such as specific sorcerers where I can two-shot them. Also for maulers, I can three-shot them instead of having to four-shot them or more. Even marauders, I can one-shot them pretty much, or worst case scenario, two-shot them. It's a great all-round combination for just everything in general. Remember, you're not reaching breakpoints with the longbow or with the Waystalker in general. So you want to be able to get as good as you can for everything in general. Regarding the swift bow, it's great for spamming, great for horde clearing, at melee or ranged as I mentioned, great for pushing back assassins, good for bosses and kiting them, pretty bad for elites and most specials, which is what kind of put me off of it. Never use quick shot against armored since it won't do any damage. Always pull your bow all the way back, that's where you're going to do your heavy attacks, that's where you're going to penetrate the armor. And just keep in mind that whether you use armored on both your swift bow and charm as properties, you won't escape the fact that your damage versus armored is always going to be pretty terrible in general. Therefore you might as well go with Skaven Infantry and Chaos Infantry, that way you have both enemy sides covered to a certain degree. I would recommend Hunter preferably as a weapon trait, which is very good for boss DPS especially. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if a Chaos Warrior shows up, you can fire your swift bow at it to get your Hunter buff up. So you're doing 25% more damage to that target and to similar targets with the same armor class. You take out your glaive or your dual daggers or whatever, and then you can just destroy them very quickly. Scrounger can also be a viable option if you're planning on spamming your swift bow as if there were no tomorrow. For clearing hordes, I recommend just spamming your light attack. Since the penetration is the same as pulling your bow all the way back, you're just shooting slower, so you're doing less DPS, but you're killing the same. So you might as well just spam your light attacks against the horde. That's why the swift bow is so effective at clearing hordes. You just spam that left click and you just see the horde disappearing before your eyes. The swift bow is kind of like a little machine gun that just fires arrows one after the other very quickly, so it's amazing for that. And that's how you want to take on bosses as well. You want to spam your left mouse button at bosses so you fire very quickly and you can see their health bar going down. So here's a fairly decent example of what I'm referring to. Horde spawns, I start spamming my bow, clearing it out of the way. As you can see, thanks to the Slayer and myself, the horde isn't getting anywhere near us. Boss spawns, we decide to pull back. Take out a grenade, but I decide to keep it. Why? Because if the boss grabs one of our teammates, we can stagger the boss with a grenade and the boss will let go of our teammate. So as you can see, I'm spamming my swift bow, doing some decent damage to it. At this point, out of 75 arrows, I'm at about 45, so I'm still fairly good. Now I've lost aggro on the boss, I decide to clear the rest with my glaive. Very quickly, as you can see, the glaive is just amazing. I check everywhere to make sure there aren't any specials showing up. One of our teammates go down, but it's okay. I go around, I start clearing the horde again, spamming my swift bow, trying to make sure the horde doesn't get anywhere near us. Boss catches aggro, I kite him, and I shoot him at the same time. This is what I was referring to when the swift bow is good for kiting bosses. So he almost grabs me, but he grabs a teammate. This is where the grenade comes handy. There we go. He doesn't get any health. I spam him again. Block, kite, spam, block, kite, and I just let my friends finish him off. Last but not least, the Hagbane. I'm probably gonna get a lot of crap for this, but Hagbane is my least favorite of the bows. I know, relax. The reason I don't like the Hagbane as much is simply because in practice, it's just not good enough in comparison. In theory, it's amazing. You can potentially kill 50 slave rats with literally one arrow. I know, right? How insane is that? The issue is that for this to happen, all of those slave rats have to be bunched up, one on top of the other. In practice, however, hordes aren't grouped up that tightly, and therefore you're wasting a lot of your ammo if you start spamming your Hagbane. In practice, however, it's also amazing, but only on bosses. The boss damage with the right setup is just ridiculous. Check this clip out. Yeah, you're not seeing it wrong. That took 11 seconds flat. I know this is not necessarily a real world example since you'll most likely pull the boss, making you run for your life, but it gives you an idea of how bonkers the damage can be. But that's it, I guess. You could argue that the Hagbane is amazing if you're only going to use it for bosses, and for everything else you'll just melee your way through or have someone else take care of the specials. I guess that could be an argument for using Hagbane. Speaking of specials as well as elites, pretty much every elite and special requires more than one Hagbane arrow to die. You may think, well, that's pretty much the same as a longbow, right? Yes and no. The main difference is that the longbow kills those mobs with the initial impact of the arrow. In other words, the damage of each longbow arrow is instant, like the swiftbow. The Hagbane, on the other hand, has very little initial damage, if any. It depends entirely on the damage over time it causes, or dots for short. How is this a problem? Well, I'll give you an example. If a globadier spawns, your objective is to kill it before it throws one of its poison bombs, right? If you shoot it with a Hagbane arrow, the globadier won't die from the initial impact, giving it enough time to throw its bomb at your group. With the longbow, even the swiftbow, on the other hand, the initial impact of the first arrow will not only damage it, but stagger it as well. Therefore, the globadier won't have a chance to attack. Another issue with the Hagbane is the fact that you are guaranteed to friendly fire your teammates, like a lot, and the friendly fire effect of the Hagbane poison is just horrendous. So all in all, the Hagbane, it's decent for hordes, better for bosses, like much better for bosses. It definitely has a low initial impact, depends too much on dots, and it's got low ammo. I would highly recommend Barrage for the Hagbane, especially if you're just gonna focus on bosses. Unfortunately, I don't have a red Hagbane. However, I did manage to get a level 300 orange Hagbane with perfect stats on it, 10% power versus monsters and 10% power versus Skaven, which is actually fantastic for this Hagbane. And I also rolled Barrage, like I said before. Highly recommend it. As for the charm, I would either go with power versus chaos and power versus Skaven, or if you want to focus mainly on bosses, you could go directly for power versus chaos and power versus monsters. That way you've got power versus monsters on both your charm and your weapon, and you've got power versus Skaven and power versus chaos on each one of those. That way you've got all the colors of the spectrum allocated. Okay, so for the necklace and the trinket, I generally leave these ones aside because they're pretty much the same for every single class I play. For the necklace, you've got the obligatory 2 stamina, 20% health. For the trait, still using Healer's Touch, 25% chance to not consume healing item on use. Fantastic for team play. If you really want to be that kind of team player that you heal yourself, you've got a chance of not consuming that healing potion or that healing pack, so you can use it on your teammates. Fantastic, that's great. Go for it. If not, like always, Boon of Shalia is the way to go. Increases effectiveness of healing on you by 30%. This is also amazing. For the trinket, you've got your curse resistance since you're generally going to be picking up Grims, and 5% crit chance in this case, which is great because it stacks with the talent that increases critical hit chance by 5%. So you've got an additional 10% right there. As for the trade, still going with Grenadier, 25% chance to not consume grenade on use. Like I said before in the past, usually I have a teammate that's using Shrapnel. For those of you who don't know what Shrapnel is, it's basically grenades cause hit enemies to take 20% increased damage for 10 seconds, which is also great. But again, like I said, I usually have somebody on the team that has that, so I go with Grenadier, 25% chance to not consume grenade on use, which is also pretty amazing. This is amazing because it's useful for every single type of scenario, whereas Shrapnel is really only useful in practice for bosses.